Hello, and thank you all for joining us again here today on Hastings County for another TTRPG Talk. This video series takes a look at tabletop role-playing games as well as different aspects of game development and design. Today we're going to be continuing the series that I had briefly started by taking a look at different types of character creation, particularly focusing on type of character creation that I'm particularly enamored with, and that is the sort of Lifepath style systems. For those of you who are unaware of exactly what I'm talking about or haven't seen the other videos, basically a Lifepath system is one where in the process of developing your character, you're actually kind of walking through their life, different aspects of their life, and as a result of picking out these different aspects and elements of the character through their backstory, that is how you basically build the character, oftentimes with the rest of the group, so that you can also interweave potentially the different backgrounds and aspects of your characters together. Today we're going to be focusing on a new, it's a relatively new game, a new version of the game, and that is the Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log. This is basically the solo version of the relatively popular Star Trek Adventures. This, of course, was released by Modifius and utilizes their 2D20 system. So this is basically a standalone solo version of the game. However, one thing that's important to note is that the character creation is pretty much identical between this and standard Star Trek Adventures, or if there are any differences, I haven't necessarily really noticed them very much, and they are pretty minimal. Most of the difference is more in how you play rather than the different methods of character creation. So even though I'm using the Captain's Log and the Captain's Log character sheet and all that stuff, pretty much everything that I'm doing also applies to the actual game itself, the actual Star Trek Adventures, like full-blown multiplayer game. And characters can swap back and forth. Basically, what I envision the Captain's Log as being really good at, aside from obviously letting a person play a solo game, is that it also is a potentially really useful tool for maybe to build some backstory for a character before you actually get involved in a multiplayer game, or maybe you use this as like a side episode whenever you have like a large gap of time, and then you kind of bring that story back and share it with the rest of the group. Those are all different ways that you could potentially utilize this system. Now, we were going to go ahead and jump over to our screen. So, real quick, before we actually dive into the actual character creation system and the way that is supposed to work, let's take a look at some of the different aspects of a character, just so you have a basic idea of how this works. So, every character is going to have traits. So traits you can see kind of go here. Traits essentially are different, physical or ability aspects or different things that come from you as a person. So, for example, a trait that pretty much every character has is essentially their species, whatever that may be. Some species might give a person certain special abilities, like obviously, for example, like a betazoid in Star Trek, of course, will give you certain telepathic abilities or empathic abilities if you're only partial beta Z. Vulcans obviously have certain things that they're able to do, and so on and so forth. Whenever your character is doing an action, the main things that you will be applying would be your attributes, which are here in blue, and the disciplines, which are here in the sort of goldish brown color. Just to explain these, basically, again, these 6 attributes, they're very similar to other forms of attributes or ability scores in lots of other games. These are your actual physical and mental abilities. Normally, this will be a score where like the middle or standard, the sort of average is a 7, and you can go up and down from there. Then we have the actual disciplines. These are basically like training in certain different aspects of the different types of things that a person might need to do on a Starfleet ship. Basically, whenever your character needs to do a certain thing, you would combine those two numbers together. Then you roll your d20s, which you always roll at least 2. And then the number of d20s that go at or below your target number are successes. Certain actions would require having a certain number of successes. So we just finished talking about attributes and disciplines. Another important aspect, actually I'm going to bring over the book here so we can look at this a bit more in detail. Another element is focuses. So obviously these 6 disciplines that we're talking about, they're very broad. Engineering embraces a lot of stuff, right? Your engineer could be building spaceships, or your engineer could be like an architect, or your engineer could be basically a radio operator, or basically, specializes in building warp drives, or, those are what we would call focuses, right? Focuses are basically different elements that you're really good at, or that you have received specialized training in doing. These are all things that might be associated with a particular aspect, but actually when you're doing actions, you don't have to be using that particular discipline. You don't have to be utilizing that particular discipline to actually take advantage of the focus, right? So, for example, again, if I have a focus in bladed combat, right? Combat with bladed weapons, I could potentially use that focus to, in combination with engineering or certain other things, to potentially make a bladed weapon. Finally, the last major aspect that usually makes up our character are their values. So these values are basically statements that we can tap into to gain certain extra bonuses while we're playing. So these should be basically, again, these are primarily written as value statements. So some examples here on the page are, these are values that should be beneficial to the character at times at least, could potentially cause trouble. They can evolve. That's another thing, is while you're playing, your values can potentially change. And then, of course, you need to try to make them a statement that's understandable. So, for example, they could be first do no harm if you're a doctor, right? Or never trust a Cardassian. So again, they might be positive elements that you believe, that your character believes in, but they're not always necessarily positive. In that the idea is just that they, in general, should be beneficial for your character. Yeah, and of course, also sometimes you might have values that conflict with each other. A certain character development moment might be that one of those values ends up shifting to better mesh with the other, or goes away completely. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the Lifepath character creation system. Before we actually hop into the actual system and start creating this character that we've kind of come here to make, instead we're going to real quick go through the actual individual steps of the Lifepath creation system, just like we did when we took a look at Traveler. So here we have a very nice diagram that they have provided us, which I don't believe there was a diagram like this in the original Star Trek Adventures book, if I recall correctly. So this is a really a nice addition. So the first thing that we need to do is, which I have already done over here on our character sheet, is that all of our attributes are going to start at a 7, and each of our disciplines start at 1. Just to continue to clarify that, each of these attributes, while during the process of character creation, can only go up to a 12. We can't have any go above 12. And any of our commands, the highest any of our commands can get is a 5, and only one of them can be a 5. The other ones need to be a 4 or less. We'll go ahead and take a look at these steps. So the first thing that they're going to have us do is pick our species. Species may potentially give us 1 or more traits, and will also give us a +1 to 3 different attributes that will kind of get us started. The next step is the environment. So this is sort of like the settings or conditions of basically where we were born and where we spent a lot of our early life. Basically, our very early childhood. This will give us a +1 to an attribute, +1 to a discipline, and also give us our first value. And that is probably going to be attached to maybe either a future vision that we have, basically imagining like a dream that our childhood character might have had, or it might be related to a lesson that they learned as a result of where they grew up or the circumstances in which they grew up. The third step is early outlook. So again, this is more looking at the upbringing of our character. This is looking at the sort of aspirations of our character. Basically, this is like them going from that small child up to about like a teenager, right? Again, here we're going to be adding +3 to different attributes. Not +3 to an attribute, but like spread out amongst different attributes. +1 again to one of our disciplines, sort of representing like what we learned in school and stuff. And also this is where we get our first focus. Step 4, this is where we go and get our official training. So obviously, this is under the assumption that our characters are going into Starfleet. So the idea is that our characters are probably going to Starfleet Academy. Or they might be getting some other different specialist training, like let's say going to the Vulcan Science Academy, or maybe they ended up entering Starfleet through some unconventional means. So in which case they would probably be getting, again, we're getting +3 to different attributes. We're getting 4 points in any of our disciplines. Again, sort of representing the training and schooling that we got at this stage, or learning on the job, let's say, if we were like, let's say, a member of the Marquis or something. Again, we're getting another value. So that makes 2 values now. And we're getting 3 focuses. So that means we now have 4 focuses. Next, we determine the length of our career up to this point, and we add a value. Then we start creating career events. This again depends on the length of our career. Here it suggests that we should do this twice. Then we finally come to our finishing touches. So basically here we're just refining, the direction that our character has kind of gone in so far, adding a final value, and then 2 more points in our attributes and our disciplines. Then we check and adjust, make sure we didn't have anything go too far, like accidentally put in too many points into an attribute or any of our disciplines. Make sure that we have 56 points in all of our attributes sort of divvied up. Basically, no matter what happens, you're probably going to end up with 56 points, or at least you should. Make sure we have 4 values, 6 focuses, make sure we didn't miss anything, that we have a total of 16 points in our disciplines. And then, of course, this is where we would finalize the rank and assignment and the posting and department, name our character, all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Obviously, as we mentioned, the first thing we're going to need to do is roll a species. I think that we're going to go ahead and do a next generation era character. So I'm not going to bother rolling on this randomization era table. We're going to be doing next gen. So that should be over here. Yeah, here. So here you see we have a 20-sided table for just randomizing the species of our character. Some of these you might not necessarily want to pick, or of course you can just pick any of the many that you see here. There are a lot of them. Anyway, yes, I'm going to go ahead and just roll on this table to make this quick and simple. And I rolled a 15, which is a Paradan. So we're going to flip over here. Paradan. Okay, so it says here, this is a gamma quadrant species that relies on their olfactory glands to determine the mood of whoever they're speaking to, and they possess scent glands around their bodies that release potent odors. Paradans are physically imposing and are able to survive comfortably in hot environments. Paradan gives us a +1 to fitness, insight, and presence. And I will go ahead and note that under our traits. So basically, because we're a Patadon, that means probably if we encountered other species that primarily rely on scent to communicate with each other, or if we encountered another Patadon, then we could probably, use scents to communicate with each other instead of having to rely on, verbal communication or stuff like that, which could potentially be useful in certain situations. Anywho, so we will go ahead and move on to step 2. Again, step 2 is environment. So basically we're going to roll on a randomized table that will kind of tell us about the sort of specific situations that we grew up in, which we can do a setting or we can do conditions. In the original, you just had settings. You didn't have conditions. I really like these conditions, so I think I'm going to go ahead and roll on this. So I'm going to roll a d20. I rolled a 14, which means asceticism and introspection. So we had asceticism and introspection. So over here in the book, it says, your life was a simple one, lacking in many of the luxuries that a prosperous world would take for granted. This is not because of a lack, but rather out of choice, a belief amongst those you grew up with, that an external and material abundance can distract from self-knowledge and personal growth. So it says value. At this step, your character gains a single value. This value should reflect the environment and culture that they were raised in. This is a good opportunity to consider how the character views society and the beliefs instilled in them during their upbringing. Next, we should also choose to put +1 in control, insight, or reason, and then +1 in science, engineering, or medicine. I'm thinking we should probably go ahead and put the +1 into, where were they again? Control. I like control. We should put +1 in control. And then we need to decide engineering, science, or medicine. I'm liking engineering. I think we're going to put +1 in engineering. Alrighty, and then we need a value. What would be a good aesthetic value? Or maybe rebelling against it. So the value I gave my character, keep in mind, obviously, you can, tweak and tailor these as you go, because you might create a value really early on, and then it doesn't really end up fitting your character later, especially if you do a lot of randomization. But the value I decided to put for this one was to understand societies. You must understand their tools. That kind of goes with the engineering trait and control trait that I gave them. Actually, no, we're going to put this in. It makes more sense to put this in insight instead of in control. We're going to do that instead. I'm kind of seeing this as being kind of like, think of this as kind of like an archaeologist, in that basically in order to really understand a society, what they believe in, what they do, what they're capable of as a people, as a group of people, one of the best ways to kind of figure that out is to take a look at the material culture that they left behind. So to understand societies, you must understand their tools. In order to understand how the society works, how they think, how they feel, what they value, you need to understand their material culture. In that, you have to take a look at, especially, again, if we're talking like archaeology or whatever, you got to understand what they do, how they do it, right? What they have available to do what they need to do. All right, so next we're going to move on to the sort of early outlook. Again, this is like the upbringing of our character when they were really young. Essentially, we have 3 different approaches to determine how this sort of early outlook have formed or impacted their character. So either we can roll on the specific upbringing that our character potentially experienced. If we're playing a Klingon character, we would roll their caste, or some other society that has a similar caste structure. Presumably, we'd also roll on the caste table, or we can just pick an aspiration. which I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do upbringing. If I roll Starfleet, I'm going to just pick something else because it doesn't make any sense for our character because of the species that we picked. So I'm going to go ahead and roll. And I rolled a 9, which is agriculture or rural, which kind of makes sense. So it says your character grew up surrounded by more by nature than by people in a rural community or on the frontier, somewhere else distanced from the bustle of cities and larger populations. They might be heavily involved in agriculture, growing real food to supplement synthesized or replicated meals. All right, so attributes. Basically, when it comes to attributes, we need to determine whether our character accepted their childhood or kind of rebelled against their childhood. If they accepted it, then basically they gain control +1 and fitness +2, basically because of the physically engaging in the actual agricultural work and stuff. If our character rebelled against this upbringing, then they more likely embraced science, technology, and the fruits of civilization that unfortunately they don't have because they grew up in the rural countryside or the frontiers of whatever place they are from, in which case they would increase their presence by 1 and reason by 2. I think our character actually rebelled against this sort of upbringing, not necessarily because they wanted that sort of urban materialist culture or an experience, but more just because I feel like they wanted to know more about people and to experience people and to learn more about, again, as I mentioned earlier, right, with the value that we gave them last time, where to understand people, you need to understand their tools. Obviously, they're not being exposed to very much out in the countryside. They want to know more about other people's, other things, other tools that people are using. So yes, we'll be increasing our presence by 1. So that goes up to 9. And what was the other one? Reason, right? Reason needs to go up by 2. So that will also go up to 9. Then we have a rather well-balanced and well-rounded character, as long as we're not attempting to engage in certain risky activities. And let's see. Yes. So our character living off the land and growing up in the edge of civilization allows them to increase either con, security, or medicine by 1. I think we're going to put the +1 in con. And then, of course, we gain our first focus. So it says here, yes, we gain a single focus related to our rural lifestyle and the skills that we learned there. Some examples they give us are animal handling, athletics, emergency medicine, endurance, ground vehicles, infectious diseases, navigation, survival training, and toxicology. None of these are really jumping out to me. I think I'm going to, I think if I recall correctly, back on page 85, yeah, we have these focuses. So, I keep talking about anthropology. That would also make sense. Why not anthropology? Yeah, no, I'm going to go with anthropology. Yes, okay. So our first focus is going to be anthropology. Again, even though we don't have any... Oh, no, actually, we take that back. We do have points in engineering. That's right. I forgot. For some reason in my head, I had it that we had it in science. Yeah, we'll still go with anthropology anyway, even though we're a practical anthropologist. We're an experimental anthropologist. It means we need to have good engineering skills. Okie dokie. Now, it is time for education. Now, again... So it says here, some of our characters at the center of a captain's log story will have received their education at Starfleet Academy. However, others may have received it on the streets of a busy commercial colony, traveling among the stars, or within the societal structure of another civilization. Whatever form their education took, it will contribute significantly to the character's makeup in the beginning of their journey in Captain's Log, affecting their attributes, disciplines, values, and foci. Whenever assigning focuses, you may choose one of the provided examples or randomly select one on the probability matrix that we were just taking a look at. That's back on pages 85, 86, and 87, or choose one of your own making. So again, I'm going to roll randomly. However, if we roll a 1 or a 5 for Starfleet Academy, I'm going to say that we didn't go to Starfleet Academy, and instead we're going to go somewhere else. I rolled a 4, so we're going to roll again. 16. Okay, 16 is civilian training. Here we go. Okay, so civilian career training. They've been known to become involved in adventures, great or small, throughout the Star Trek universe, from Ambassador Sarek's strategic negotiations to discovery of the USS Protostar by Dar-Rael. Building a captain's log story around a civilian character offers a chance to shine the light on the life outside of Starfleet. Yes, that would actually be a very interesting thing to do. Of course, we don't hold any Starfleet rank or any military rank, although we might be granted an honorary rank if we actually do participate in an actual Starfleet ship. So we need to roll here. Do I just want to pick something? I mean, I did get anthropology. Maybe we're like an Indiana Jones style character, in which case probably we want to be a scientific or technical expert. I don't know. Let's roll and just see what that pops up and if we like it. Oh, I rolled a 14, which means a scientific or technical expert. Nice. Civilian, scientific, or technical expert. Okie dokie. So we would hop over here. So it says here, we pursue scientific truth or technological progress, seeking to become your generation's Zefram Cofran, Emery Erickson, blah, 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 Daystrom, so on and so forth. You probably specialize in a single field of scientific study or technical expertise, or a small number of related fields. You may end up working with Starfleet or a military, but this is more because they are interested in your work rather than you being interested in serving their goals. So, of course, we get a value. We get 3 points, which can be divided between 2 or 3 different attributes freely. So, yeah. At least one of these attributes you increase must be reason, as nobody gets very far without science or engineering without a keen intellect. Okay, so we have to put at least +1 into reason, which would make that a 10. And then we get 2 more points we can put somewhere else. I think we're going to put a point in daring. And another point into insight. Okay. Our disciplines. We increase your science or engineering by 2, and then 2 other disciplines by 1. In addition, you may reduce one of your other disciplines by 1 in order to shift that point to a discipline that has not already been increased. Okay, so basically, well, I mean, we have a point in engineering, so unless we don't put anything in engineering, that's not going to happen. Okay, I'm going to increase science by 2. Nope, so that should be a 3. And then +1 into other 2 things. Let's put a +1 into con. And a +1 into maybe command. And we don't want to move our point out of engineering into anywhere else. We'll just leave it where it is. Okay. So we may select 3 focuses. So they give us a large number of examples like astrophysics, exotectonics, genetics, quantum mechanics, temporal mechanics, transporters. This is all assuming that we're involved heavily in science or like technical engineering. All right, and let's take a look at, let's see what focuses are here. Cultural expert. Yes, that's a good one. Let's be a cultural expert. All right, hopping back over here. Oh, wait, we did anthropology. Let's also grab archaeology. I actually meant to grab archaeology the first time instead of anthropology, but it makes sense for us to have anthropology too. So anthropology for the living people, archaeology for the dead ones, or for the buried ones anyway. And then cultural expert, okay, and so we get 1 more. I think a good thing for us to get would be maybe modeling and design, because I'm thinking, again, I keep getting this feeling of maybe our person is or maybe prototyping. I'm thinking either modeling and design or prototyping, because I'm thinking our person is kind of like an experimental archaeologist, essentially, where they basically study people from the past and try to determine their cultural and things like that. And maybe we kind of got sucked in by Starfleet or some other allied society in order to try to explore and understand the material culture of a people who are not really around anymore, but may have potentially created some really interesting things that could be very useful in one capacity or another for Starfleet and other folks. So I think we'll go with prototyping, because that basically sort of suggests like my character's ability to experiment and attempt to try to figure out exactly how it is that this thing potentially worked, with only having like part of it or having it partially broken, or not really understanding exactly how it's supposed to work, but can utilize their prototyping skills to essentially try to iterate and figure out and experiment and see, how this thing actually worked and what it did and stuff like that. All right, we need a value. There are lessons in the past. Correction. There are lessons in our past. There we go. That's good. So this could refer not only to, learning from the past of a society, or learning from the past of, the Paradan people, like this person is from, but also potentially learning from his or her own past. All right. Again, next we have our career length. Are they a novice or are they experienced? Here we go. We rolled a 5, so that means we're a novice. So that means we now need to create a value that sort of reflects their inexperience or naivete. So again, this value should sort of like indicate their innocence and naivete or inexperience in some capacity. So with that in mind, and considering that our character grew up in a very ascetic and isolated environment. Here we go. I am a team of one. Basically, this person is very, very used to sort of working on their own, doing things on their own, learning on their own, teaching themselves. So because of all of that, they're not good at working with other people. They've gotten really experienced at having to basically do things on their own. So hopefully that's something that they'll kind of grow out of. So now we actually roll the career events. One thing that's important to note is that a lot of these are really themed with the intention of the character being in Starfleet. So a number of these are probably not really appropriate for a character. Some of them are potentially clearly, useful, but we'll see. All right, the first one we rolled is a 12. Betrayed ideals for superior. Alrighty, just to clarify exactly what this means. Your character is placed in a situation where they had to choose between their own ideals or a trusted superior, choosing to follow the superior. Who was the superior? What did they ask the character to do? How does your character feel about it now? What are the repercussions? What details of the event are on record versus off the record? And was your character right, or was the superior correct? So because of this, we increase our presence by 1, we increase our command by 1, and then we also gain a focus reflecting the event and its aftermath, like inspiration, investigation, persuasion, or so on. Right. Okay, we said presence is increased by 1, command is increased by 1. So we have a command of 3 now, and a presence of 10. We're actually kind of more of a command-focused character now. In this particular case, I think actually this probably inspired the value that our character has, that they're a team of one, because they still feel a bit icky about basically whatever happened here. I'm thinking there weren't necessarily any super big negative repercussions, at least not for them. Because again, they kind of covered something up. And so there are no real details on the record about exactly what happened. I'm thinking this, like, again, we got lots of training in archaeology and stuff like that. I'm thinking our superior was like the head of a dig, or some scientists trying to interpret some of the materials that were found. And the superior asked us to potentially ignore some data that would have completely revolutionized something, but would have also severely bucked the status quo and potentially destroyed our superior's reputation and career. So instead, we did what they asked, because we didn't necessarily want to hurt them, but yeah. So because of that, I think we're actually going to, instead of any of those examples, I think the focus that we're actually going to give ourselves is actually deception, because of hiding the truth. Now we're going to roll our second career event. We rolled an 11. Dealing with a plague. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how this fits in, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, so basically, here it says your character ship was assigned to provide aid to a world dealing with an epidemic. I'm thinking what probably happened is that we were on a world, and then suddenly it started experiencing an epidemic while we were there. So it says here, did the character deal directly with the sick? How was your character involved? So, yes, helping people in distress. So for our attributes we gain from this, helping people in distress during a massive crisis, help your character understand people better by increasing their insight by 1. So we now have an insight of 11, which is awesome. Disciplines, dealing with a problem of this nature increases your character's medicine by 1. Okay. And then, of course, we can gain a focus, probably related to how they helped out during the crisis. So we have emergency medicine, infectious diseases, or triage as examples. I'm thinking our character probably did not necessarily get directly involved. Maybe counseling? Therapy? I'm liking counseling. Yeah, maybe we gain, or maybe psychology. No, I'm going to go with counseling, because, I mean, obviously our character would not have gained like a full understanding of exactly what psychology, how all that works, but probably gained enough experience to be able to like talk people through their issues and stuff. Yeah, I think our character is probably a counselor, trying to help people sort of, because of their strong presence and insight and being able to very easily understand people. And again, material culture, right? Just look at what a person does, what they handle, what they like. That can help a lot. Anyway, so yeah, we'll go with counseling. Alrighty. So that is, and now it is time for our finishing touches. So we gain a final value. This could reflect things that happened in the last step, or just something that represents some other element of this character that we're trying to introduce. We can increase 2 attributes by 1 each, and increase 2 disciplines by 1 each. I'm going to say that the 2 disciplines we're going to increase are engineering, which will be increased to 3, and science, which will be increased to 4. And then our attributes, let's increase our reason to 11 and increase our control. All right, we need to give a final value. Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how it would be good to have like a value that sort of embraces the idea that the truth can be difficult to accept, sort of like touching back onto both of the events that occurred, both of the career events that happened to our character. Both the sort of counseling and then also the whole betraying ideals for the superior because of, wanting to not end up severely harming their career. So I was looking on the internet to just try to come up with a good way to sort of synthesize that, and I found something that actually is interesting. It doesn't quite embrace that idea, but definitely seems to fit our character better. And this is a quote from Piotr Ospinski, who was a Russian philosopher. And he has a quote that he's kind of known for sometimes, which is, most people can accept the truth only in the form of a lie. And I think that really fits sort of like the deception of our character. And kind of like the experiences that they've had in the past. Basically, our character has kind of gotten a little scarred by the things that they have gotten to experience. Some of that naivete has kind of been broken. And that's basically, and this is not necessarily to say that like this person, that I'm not trying to say that our character necessarily thinks that like other people are evil or bad or anything because of this, but more just that like, and I don't necessarily mean lie as in like intentional falsehood, but more of just like, most people can only accept the truth if it's told to them in a story, even if that story itself is not true, even if the truth that you're being told is not necessarily the whole truth or the full, it's not a full truth. It's more like a white lie. Just think of like, the mythology, this cultural mythologies that many countries have and stuff like that, where, the stories we tell ourselves are not the truth, right? The stories that we tell ourselves about like our past, our people, ourselves, a lot of it's not true. Either because we've misremembered things or, details have been intentionally left out, or because maybe, I don't know, maybe it's we've intentionally forgotten things that happened to us in our past because they're just horrible things we don't want to remember, right? Or because they're things that we're embarrassed about that we did that don't no longer really fit our image of ourselves in the present, or there were yeah. Sorry, this is turning into philosophy 101, but anyway, I'm gonna make that quote basically our final value is, most people can accept the truth only as in the form of a lie. Okay, and that pretty much finishes up most of the elements of our character. Now we should be like giving them a name, an assignment, stuff like that. Ranks. So our character should not have a rank because, of course, they're not a person who should have a rank. I'm not really sure what to name a Paradon anyway. I'm not going to give our character a name or a pronouns or an assignment or anything at this point. If I obviously play this character, then obviously I'd want to add those things. But for now, I'm going to leave them be and kind of think on them for a bit. That was sort of like the sort of Lifepath system that is utilized in the Star Trek Adventures and system, including, of course, the Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log. For those of you who might be more interested in other Lifepath systems, you can, especially ones that sort of dabble a bit differently in certain system and certain elements, like potentially having long or short careers like you see in Traveler or in the the Sherwood game that I had first started the series with. A link to the playlist can be found in the in card for this video, so definitely check those out. I do hope to at some point add a couple more videos to this series when I get the chance, especially one that I have been meaning to grab but haven't yet is the Lifepath system that exists in Cyberpunk. And there are one or two other ones that an Artesia, Legends of the Adventures in the Known World is another one that I really want to take a look at, because that one is so, that one's going to be multiple videos. It's very long and complicated. It's going to be it's a process, even longer than this one. But anyway, thank you all for joining again here today on Hessens County. Don't forget to rate your itch purchases or other purchases, of course, and have a good zone.
If you would like to show your support for this channel or for the Hessens County blog, in the description down below, you will find links to the channel coffee and also the itch store. Please feel free to take a look, and thank you for your support.